if you remember right, and in the Blackboard you have an assignment to do, and it's more or less like in the theory course. There are some activities to be done. Last week well, of course, before last week we did the exercise, the hands-on deploying on Azure, etc. We used Google Cloud, and then last time we discussed through an example what I am asking you to do in order to understand, first of all, the architecture in detail, the architecture of the simple application that we developed and that we installed on Azure. So it was a first example on how we set the working environment and how we deployed it. Just how we set it. And then you have to do, as we discussed last time, well, 3 supplementary architectures to show how the application first runs on Google Cloud, and then how it is deployed on Microsoft Azure, and how it is running from Microsoft Azure. So that's a first assignment that you have to complete. As I said, we did the first example in order to get you acquainted to what is expected with respect to the architecture, and then the idea is that you continue completing the other 3 architectures. Now today we are going to go through the process. Okay, once we understand how the components, the different components of our application interact among each other, and how they are located within the cloud, then the idea is to show what is the process that we have to implement in order to first set up the environment, then the main processes that run within the application. And one of the processes that we are going to discuss today, because it's an interesting thing to do, is the role of ngrok in the environment, and then I hope you will be ready to complete the other processes. So that will be the second part, and the third part is that you compare with the tutorial of Microsoft Azure, the difference between the one that we implemented in the lab and the one that they propose. That's something that you will do on your own. And then the fourth activity to do is creating a glossary of all the terms, all the notions that you consider important and that someone would have to bear in mind in order to have complete control and detailed understanding of the exercise. Okay, so that's all the things that you have to do. They are described on the Blackboard. The only thing that it's not said, and that I will complete after our session today, is when you have to hand in and how much is worth in the global grade. It is said, but the different points of the different parts that you have to complete are not explicitly described, so I will provide you with the points that you will gain by doing the different activities, so that you get a first evaluation of the lab. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to make clear, so that no one gets lost and that everyone can complete her or his activities and assignment to get the points of the evaluation. Do you have questions concerning this administrative but important aspect? Please, Alexander.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if there was a due date.
If there was what?
A due date, like date
A
when
due
we.
date? No, as I said, I still have to determine the deadline and the points. For the time being, I haven't decided yet.
Okay, thank you
It
very much.
depends on what we're going to do today that I will decide.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome. Other questions? Clear as water, everything? Right. So let's move to the activities. So I'm going to I'm just going to wrap up on what we did last time, just to make sure that you all have in mind what should be done for the architecture, and then we will move on to the process. So I'm going to stop sharing this Blackboard, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. And there's someone messaging me consistently, but do not, I think that you do not hear but you will see the messages in a moment. Sorry for that. Okay, so I'm gonna share this. So last time what we did is we worked with one of your colleagues, the discussion on the architecture that represents the setting up of the environment used in order to build an application, a web application, completely externalized in a cloud solution, and then deploy it on another cloud. Okay, so what we said is that the first thing to do when we want to describe and draw an architecture is, first of all, identifying the components that compose this architecture. And last time we decided to exhibit all the components that compose our exercise, and therefore particularly identifying the services of the cloud that we were of the clouds that we were using, and where are they located with respect to the cloud reference architecture. And so what we did is that we identified that concerning Google Cloud, we were using infrastructure as a service elements, particularly storage, and also computing capacity in CPU and RAM. And therefore, there you see in the left side of my figure that in one of the rectangles that you have there, you have the storage provided by Azure, and then the Google Drive file system that gives us access to that storage. And we concluded that the storage support, since we are dealing with storage space with disk, it is infrastructure as a service, and the file system that is deployed on top of this space is a platform as a service. And then with respect to the other infrastructure as a service, we saw that explicitly when we ran the exercise that we were allocated with CPU and RAM. In this point, CPU is the only thing that we will see, but eventually, while we will go through data analytics aspects, we will see that it is possible to have other computing services like TPUs, like GPUs, etc. So this is why I consider important that we exhibit this, because we will move towards other infrastructure as a service. But anyway, this part composes the part of the components that we used from Google Cloud. And then we have the platform as a service services that let us implement the application, and then we relied on a notebook-based solution because we were writing in we were using Python, and so we used Jupyter in order to run notebooks written in Python, and therefore we have the Python interpreter there, and all these services are packaged in one solution called Collab, which is a platform as a service from Google Cloud. So that was the first cloud that we used, and it is very important that you bear in mind that we used it because we wanted to externalize everything that we were doing and implementing for the application. So we decided not to use our local machines in order to do that, okay? And because, well, we are in the topic of seeing what the cloud can provide, and so we went to the limit and intensive use of this to show you that you don't need even a local machine in order to build your applications. You can do it externally just with a browser on hand. Okay, so and then the other main set of components that we used from another cloud this time was Microsoft Azure, where code manager, which is called GitHub, where we have storage, we have a file system, and there we access two accounts. The one that is provided by Azure, the public repository of Azure, and then a repository of myself and my group, where we have all the code necessary in order to do the experiment. So it is important that you bear in mind that the part of the experiment that externalizes all the setting up, etc., towards the cloud is what we, my group and I, provided. Okay, so the general structure where we decided to work. Okay, that's the code that we provided, and then what Microsoft Azure provided was the code that implements the web application, the Hello World application that we first tested on Google Cloud, and then we deployed on Microsoft Azure. So that was one service where we identified all the different levels in that service that we use. So we use storage, infrastructure as a service, and the file system, and we saw even that there is a web portal, which is an application as a service that can be used in order to explore the code that is provided by GitHub. So that's one big package that we used in order to deal with the code. And then two other packages of services. One was, of course, the infrastructure as a service with CPU and RAM, where our application was running. And then a very nice service, the web app service, that lets us in a very smooth manner to deploy a web application within that environment, and then run it and expose it to the world. And that is platform as a service. And we also saw that we used CLI in order to connect and to communicate to Microsoft Azure in order to prepare and to deal with our with the code and the application, etc. And another thing that it's not exhibited in my figure is that we used, in fact, an application as a service, which is the portal of Microsoft Azure, where we have services that let us manage the services that we are using there. So we saw that our application was running and that it was consuming some resources, etc. And then when we stopped using it, then we saw that it was no longer there. And because we are also reasoning about the fact that we have a limited, even if it was big, but a limited allocation of resources with our credits, and we are sparing the use of those resources so that we can test other things. So that are the components, and once we have the components, then well, what we did, I think that the one that we did in the session was much more complete than this one. But anyway, the important thing is that the arrows, my arrows, this figure is incomplete because my arrows should have the labels of what you get and what you do with these arrows. Okay, so if you are downloading, if you are creating, if you are etc., you have to label the arrows with the operation that you are executing on top of these components. This one is not complete in that sense, but yours and the one that we worked together last time was complete. Okay, so that's architecture, components and interaction among components by exhibiting functions, and of course sometimes retrieving either code or data or something. Okay, so questions until here?
No, cherries. Thank you.
Okay. So now let's move on to process. What I did is I started to think about ngrok and how to represent a process, and I started with with some elements of the setting up of ngrok. Okay, so I'm just going to share that with you, but then I will ask someone, a volunteer, she or he, as we did last time, can share the figure, and then we can, the idea is that we work together in order to produce a first workflow on how ngrok works, so that again you can have elements and do other workflows representing the deployment, the way the application runs in Google Cloud, and then how it runs on Azure, and then the management of the application. So let's have a look. So first of all, well, we are not the only ones that are drawing processes, and in order to make sure that everyone understands what's going on. This is a common practice, so ngrok also shares on their page how their solution works. So first of all, this comes from this definition comes from ngrok's site. Ngrok, what it does, it creates a tunnel from the public internet to a port on your local machine. Okay, so the assumption is that you program your solutions in a local machine, being your physical local machine or a local machine deployed on the cloud. Okay, but anyway, the application is local to that environment, and the idea is that you can give this URL to anyone, so that the world can contact your application and try your website, but without deploying anything, okay? Without deploying this on a web server. I'm sure that you have had the experience of implementing applications on the web. Well, you program, and then the application, either you install Apache web server or whatever, and then install the application there. And here the idea is that your application is running in your local machine. You provide a port, and then without installing a web service or whatever, server, or whatever, you can expose this application on the web. Okay, but the problem, as we all know, is that this is a quite unsecure way of doing things. So what ngrok will do is provide you with a tunnel that will secure the external access to your application. So it will create a traffic tunnel, and then it provides other services so that you, as the managers of your applications, can have a look at the traffic, can have a look who is connecting to your application, etc., and control the way your application is seen and contacted from the external world. And so here you have in the figure, it's nicely represented. So you have the webhooks somewhere in servers, and then the calls and the interaction goes through ngrok.com, which is also a cloud solution, and then through it is secured through a kind of firewall that then puts people in contact with the port of your machine. Okay, and there you can well, the connection and the interaction is done. Okay, so this is the very principle. So if we have to expose the architecture concerning ngrok, well, this is a starting point. You have the local machine. In our case, it lies on Google Cloud. Then if you want, you could exhibit the firewall, then ngrok, and then the external people connecting to it. And then, well, of course, since we are asking for a detailed architecture, then you could open these little boxes and then exhibit the services that are participating in this interaction. But that would be the architecture. That's something that you can do, but this is a hint. You can start from this general idea and then zoom into the boxes. And now, how does it work? Well, the idea of doing the workflow is, in fact, like giving a recipe to someone that would like to do the exercise in this case, which are the steps that that person should do in order to start, well, in this case, to set up ngrok. Okay, so you have to do, as I said, the other processes, but this is a zoom in into the ngrok workflow setup. So you can also be comment on my figure. My figure is not perfect. Okay, so it's just a starting point so that we can discuss. Well, if you are not acquainted with the representation of workflows, workflows are composed of activities, which are these boxes. Each activity represents a verb, okay? It's an operation. And activities are ordered with respect to a control flow. The control flow can be sequential or parallel. And each activity, particularly in the case of the cloud, of the service-based architectures, each activity is executed by an external entity, which is normally a service. Okay, and the result of the activity here, in fact, the ugly part of the workflows is that they do not exhibit the data that is interacted in, that is exchanged between the two applications. The arrows particularly these arrows just represent the control flow. So if this is a sequential workflow, we could have, as I said, um, um, parallel representations, and when it's parallel, it's either you execute all the activities, which is an AND, or you execute part of it, which is an or an XOR. It's like electronics. No? You certainly have had this experience by representing electronics devices. Okay, so, and then here I'm missing the labels because the interaction with the service, there you have to exhibit what you ask from the service and what it executes and whether it produces data. Okay, so here they are incomplete. So if what I did when I started to think about this and workflow, well, set up, I said, okay, so there are in fact 4 main activities that should be done if someone wants to set up the ngrok solution. The first one is that within the code of the application, we have to, or the environment, we have any way to upload an ngrok code. And so we have to contact ngrok somewhere on the net and then get that piece of code. Then we have to install it. Then since ngrok provides us with a token, then we have to configure what we uploaded and what we installed with an authentication token. And once we configure this, what ngrok does is it creates a tunnel that will give access to the application. So that are the 4 activities that I identified. And then for each activity, I exhibited the services that were participating in it. So I said that, for example, in the first one, we upload the ngrok. So here I would have to have a package of code that comes to my activity, you know. Then when we install it, in fact, that piece of code goes to the server that we had already running. And so it's here. And then we configure that with our token. And then once the token is there and that we have the application, what it creates is this famous tunnel. And so, well, when we give the token, etc., we create a tunnel, and so the tunnel serves as kind of firewall in order to give access to our application. So that's the initial idea that that I had by representing this workflow. So first of all, do you have questions?
No, teacher is clear.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is, as I said, this is a kind of starting thing, so I'm going to stop sharing, and what I'm going to ask is, as we did the last time, if you have worked through with your own idea, to share it on the screen, and so that we can work and complete things together. So who says I? Come on, don't be shy. I don't know. I'm going to start choosing, so you have 1 second to To raise your hand. Other one, what I'm gonna do is choose. Well, I'm gonna choose. What about Nicole?
Hi, teacher. I'm currently
Hi,
not in
Nicole.
my computer. I'm on my iPad and I don't have my progress right now. So I won't be able to share my progress. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's a pity, but no problem. Well, who else? Melina. Don't leave the room. Don't be scared. Huh? Every time I start asking this, I see people leaving the room. There's no point of leaving the room. So Melina, can you share, or we can share, for example, a blackboard, and there we can start working together if you do not have a figure already.
Yes, I have a figure. Just let me
Okay.
open my this. Um, it's from the diagrams that we are
Right.
making. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going. Give me just a sec.
Yeah.
Um, you can see my screen.
Yes. Excellent.
This is uh, the diagram that I have.
Yes. Explain it,
The
and
like
then
the
we
first one.
we go to. Mm-hmm.
Wait, perdón. Okay. There is it was the first one. I'm still working on the other ones.
Okay. So how do you? Well, describe it and tell us. Describe your idea, and then we can comment.
Yeah, okay.
For
Well,
those that are joining, this is here functional architecture. Okay, so the idea is that you explain, and then you create a new sheet, and then we try to think about the process. Okay, but for the time being, explain, and then we continue.
okay, well, I start making like the diagram like at the same time we were making the activity. So the first thing was to install Azure, uh, like in this, and we
Install
use
Azure.
the
No, you don't start. You install CLA, not Azure.
well, the Azure CLA, and
Yes.
we used Google Colab as we know, and also we have to connect the Azure account, like login and all that things. So this is, I put like a double arrow because I think that it's because of the connection, yeah. So in here, for example, with Azure, the web app, it's here, and for Colab,
Yes.
there we use like
What
Jupyter and
1 minute. What I suggest is you are combining many different things. For example, the Azure web application at the beginning of in the preparation of the environment is still not present. It's only when we deploy the application that you have the Azure web app in
okay.
stage. Okay. So at the very beginning, you are right. You have collab on the right side of your figure, you install, you contact Microsoft Azure to install CLI. That's excellent, and then you establish a connection so that you can use it. Okay, so that's okay.
Okay.
And you can exhibit the web Azure app that we are going to use, but in the preparation, it is not present. It's still not present.
Okay, okay. So I can take it out, yeah?
Mhm, mhm. So you can
Okay.
divide. Well, do not do anything. Your nice figure now. When you work on your own, split. Create a copy of it, and then leave the Azure web app for another for the functional architecture that will describe the deployment.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So continue. That was the first
Okay, so
comment.
okay. Well, the second step, as I said, it was to connect the account, and then as a third step, it was like with the what we did with Nord, that well, we connect first the Nord account, and then we use the authentication token, so we can make that the real connection.
Mhm. Again,
And
did we install before we first cloned, no, the code? Didn't we?
yeah, I have it. I put like in
Ah,
the
that's number
at the
3.
same time.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it was like pretty close that steps, like that's why I put it like in the same order, let's say. So it was to clone the GitHub repository and to our project. It's here. And of course we
Mhm.
use Drive and all of these things to as a storage system.
Yes. Remember that we in fact found two things. We cloned in on one side the hackathon, but we also cloned the code of the Python application. One belongs to
Okay,
myself, my group, and the other belongs to Microsoft Azure. And then you have to exhibit
okay,
both.
okay. Yes. And
Mhm.
I have a question. I put
Yes.
this, ¿cómo se llama? This Nord connection with like the collab server, let's say. I don't know if it was correct or I don't really need it.
For the preparation, what you need is to, first of all, well, the correct, no, okay, so the connection to ngrok account we did,
Mm-hmm.
and then, yeah, it's fine. I mean, I have problems. It's a retrieve code, I see. Okay. So we retrieve the
Okay.
code from ngrok.
Mm-hmm.
No. I see. What do you mean? Um, in one Yellow, you have the server, and what do you mean by retrieving the code?
It was
You
because
see in
I don't know if it was
number
correct,
one,
but we did a step in there. What?
we
Sorry?
we install many things. For example, installed and we installed the application.
Okay.
So that should be described in I mean, as I said, for the yes, for the preparation environment, you can divide it in three steps. I mean, in three arrows,
Okay,
so that
okay.
you exhibit the part where you install the code of the hands-on, the one that implements the application, and then the fact that you get something from ngrok and you install it there too.
Okay, I'm gonna make these changes. Okay.
And then when
So
you go,
this.
you have your server and you go. One thing is that when you connect to ngrok, it's the opposite arrow, no?
Oh,
Because
okay,
from the
okay.
server you establish a connection
A
towards
connection.
ngrok.
Okay,
I mean, you
that's
contact ngrok. In fact, you retrieve ngrok, the piece of code that will create the tunnel, and then you configure it with your authentication token.
okay. So I will change it.
So
And this
there
was
you
pretty
have
much like
to
my.
revisit a little bit them. Yeah. And then another thing that it would be nice to have is the exhibiting, you know, that in GitHub you have the storage and the um, I mean the interface, platform as the platform as a service that you already have there. So that's one thing that you could exhibit. And then in the right side, it's fine. You have the storage on the drive, okay? Yes. Another thing that, well, but that's something that you have to revisit when you explode the retrieve code, is that in the server we have to see the fact that there is an ngrok code, an application code, and CLA also, everything installed there
Okay.
in
Yeah.
the IIS. Okay, right. Okay, so that's the functional architecture. So before we continue with the process, do not leave. We are maybe meanwhile you can create another. It's a Google Sheet, or what is it?
It's in the
What
chart.
are you
Yeah, I
using to
can
draw?
create another page.
Yeah, please create one because we're going to go through the process. While we have a new sheet, do people have comments or reactions or questions or similar? Okay, so let's move. If we have no questions, let's move to the process. So we are going to work together with the process. What do you prefer, to reuse my idea of setting up ngrok, or really working on the process on how ngrok works? It's up to you, Melina.
It can be maybe the second one. So I don't know if my classmates would like to
So how ngrok
analyze the
works?
other one.
Okay. So, okay. So, the first thing that we have to think about is which are the activities that will participate in this ngrok workflow when the application is already running. So think that you have to assume that ngrok is there, that you have the already the token on ready, and now the tunnel is working. Okay, of course you have the application also ready, and now the idea is that we show what happens when someone connects from outside. So which would be the activities, the operations, in fact.
Okay, so what do you like that I draw?
You can use a round rectangle, for example. You know, on the flow. In fact, we're going to do a flow chart.
Ah,
So
okay,
your
okay.
little elements of flow chart, yes, that's what
Okay.
we're doing. And that's right, it's a process.
So I can
So
put this
the
one.
rectangle, the first rectangle, that one.
Okay.
Yeah, choose one. Okay, so what happens first in order to trigger the fact that ngrok works?
A ver. I'm not sure what was the first step. Could someone want to help me?
Again, what are we doing? Are we doing ngrok is already running and we are contacting the application, or we are going to rather think about the process of what happens when we create the token, etc. Just to make sure that we are on the same page.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So I think that first we
Let's
must
begin with the,
include the steps where we create the token. So maybe it's enter to the web
okay,
page
so
and
let's
then
work, okay.
access the dashboard and create the token.
And then
Yeah.
the second one. Okay, good. So, okay, and from the creation of the token, so outside the application, really from the very beginning. Okay, so in fact, we create an account, an ngrok
Yes.
Ah,
account.
okay, that's true.
Yes, create an account.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right, so we create an ngrok account, and then we obtain, and it's fine because the thing is tricky since we have to validate the account. Remember that some of you have problems with that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's right.
so we already have, right? And then we validate the account.
I can put the validate account like to this side.
Yes, yes, because
Validate.
we have the token, but and the validation of the account is different. Okay,
Okay.
good. And now what? And all of these. Well, you can draw a little ngrok, like the one that you have in your, you know, the cloud with ngrok, so that to say that all these things are done by ngrok. No? Because we have to say who does the activities. So maybe on the left
Okay.
side, on the corner of the left side, so that.
Okay, in here.
Right, and then and then you have to use other arrows. For example, you can use dotted arrows, and then for the creation of the account, you label the arrow with create, and then your email account and let's say and password. No?
Okay, so I can put with an email. So I don't know. That's oh shit. Like this one. Good.
Yes,
No, figured.
But in fact, the arrow connects create account to ngrok.com, and then the label of the arrow is the email and your password. No? And you have to say create, and then the email and the You know, like calling up a function or a method. Like, I'm going to put it on the chat.
Oh, good.
And then you have name. Well, in fact, it's an ID. It's not even an email and password. Then it provides us with. It's on the chat. No, it's the arrow that you have to label.
Ah, you want a new arrow in here.
The arrow, yes. Yes, I will.
Like in here? You want the text in here, like this?
No, no. When you create account, you connect it to the ngrok.com cloud. Create account, the activity, yeah. You connect it to ngrok cloud. And
Okay.
there, that address is labeled with my label.
With this text, like this.
Like this, create. You have to say the name of the function. It's like calling a header, a method header. Right.
All the moments.
Now, remember that all these kind of representations, in fact, help us to specify applications. You know, when I suppose that you have studied middleware, the use of middleware, or the use of, well, for example, OS, NoSQL, etc. What happens is that people get together and write a technical specification, like the ones you have in W3C, for example. And so you have a technical description of all the methods, functions in a very detailed manner that a system must have. And then when someone wants to implement a system that adheres to this specification, she or he has all the necessary elements to implement something that really corresponds to the specification, the type of methods, the parameters, the type of parameters, the type of data, etc. So, and therefore, someone can say, okay, I use this specification, I produced a running system that conforms to that specification, and then someone testing group can go and see whether this is true, okay? In order to specify all this, you can use what we are drawing now in order to be clear in a very general and agile manner with respect to the overview both of the processes and of the architecture. And once we have all this, then we go and specify technically what we're doing. Okay, and then we put it on the web, and then someone can come and be happy and then follow our specification and build a concrete thing. So this is why we really need to label the arrows and all this. Okay. Great. So we create an account, then obtain a token is also should be connected to ngrok, but that's something that we do with copy paste. So the activity, yes, that one.
Like this?
And you can say copy paste.
This one?
the obtain token towards ngrok, you can label, yeah, that one.
Like
So this
this?
is just to tell you that we are not like here playing. We are really, it's important what we're doing. Yeah, there you see, you say copy paste because what's that? That's what we do. There's no automatic thing to do.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so okay, we're happy. We have our token, and then what happens?
After we got a token, we need to make the authentication of this token.
Okay, so
Ah,
we are in the application.
I
Yes.
I have an idea. We can also put that we are installing ngrok in the, for example, in the Google collaboratory
In
library that
parallel
we are
in the
using.
application.
Yeah,
Yes.
or on our machine.
Okay. Exactly. Well, on the external in some machine. Okay. So you
Yes,
can
that's correct.
exactly. So you can in parallel, what is happening is that we are in our code and we contact ngrok to install. And then we will have a very nice workflow because these three activities are one package of things. And in parallel, we are in our code, well, in our server, preparing things. So we are retrieving the code and installing it on the server. So you can
And
have another activity.
well,
Uh-huh.
I think how how much specific should we be in our diagrams?
Very specific as possible.
Okay. Well, in this case, when
Okay.
we are installing ngrok,
Uh-huh.
we are connected to a site that
Yes.
is called equinox.io. That is something like a program, well, a package repository for applications written in Go language. I'm going to write the link if you want to uh, make the as you
Mhm.
make the request.
But I was going to tell you, you can put your, but this is not a collaborating thing. Can you share the, no, because,
I think that,
Melina, can
yes,
you
I can
share
share it.
the, yes,
I
maybe you can
Pero
share, and
Google
so
account.
that,
Ajá.
yeah, and David can, what are you, David or Fernando?
David is
Fernando,
better for me.
David, okay,
there is. Can you tell me
Thank
if you
you.
can
okay.
enter without
Just give me a
problems?
second.
Let me click on it.
I think
Uh,
there's. Okay.
Uh,
I'm entering right now. I have to make an account. Es Lucy Chat, ¿verdad? Ah,
Mhm.
a ver. Bueno, si quieres, dame un segundo ya. Ahorita me lo dejo.
I have already lost it. I think that with someone at the lab I used, or what? Honest. So if you're already connected, um,
Almost.
almost there.
Almost there. It's now loading. And yeah, I'm here with you now. I
Okay,
think that you can
so
see now my screen, my pointer.
so put your idea.
Perfect. This is QLog servers.
And since Melina shared, all those that want to, let's put Lucid on its limits. And you can, Melina, put the other server on the yeah, close to Collab. That's our server, and then we install it. But since we have to do activities, in fact, you see, it's a kind of tricky with the workflow because download and install are two activities. So you have to have two rectangles. One is download and the other is install. And the one that does the activity, that performs the activities, our code in Collab, and then install too. So you need one rectangle for download and another rectangle for install.
So one for download. Okay.
Yeah,
Download and
like the
doc.
ones that Melina draw in the other side.
Okay.
But you need rectangles because we are showing the process. Normally you have the habit of, that's a functional architecture, whereas we are drawing the process. So you need a rectangle. A rectangle.
A rectangle like this one, the varied account, create account.
Yes, a rectangle like the one she did.
Okay. So, yeah, I understand now. Okay.
And there you write download and grok.
Oh, yeah,
You see, she was doing quite well.
perfect.
And then
Ah,
download.
sorry. Move your square.
Good. And then dotted arrow to collab because collab is the one that is downloading the ngrok.
Okay, right. So this is the other way.
And the Equinox server is hidden because In fact, what you can do is download ngrok from Equinox server or something like that, because you do
Okay.
not exhibit the fact that it is ngrok, that it is Equinox that is providing the code. Yes.
Like that?
Yes, like that.
Okay. Very good.
And then install ngrok is also done by Collab. And in fact, you have to say collab and then put in fact, it's of course collab, but it's our code.
Mm-hmm.
We did it. Mhm. And then instead of Equinox server, you need an agent saying, which is the Google server, and then you install ngrok contacts that server in order to install the ngrok. No,
I don't know.
what is the server?
Uh,
Server.
Another server
You killed your
or what?
server, and now we are without
Ah,
server.
mm,
That's
honestly.
But that's Google Cloud Server. That's ours. It's not Equinox server.
Okay.
And that one is connected to the activity install ngrok with a dotted arrow. Or the opposite side, because you install it. The
Right.
activity calls, right? You need
Oh,
also labels on your arrows, and we do not need the collab and arrow between collab and the server. We don't need that.
okay.
And then we need to connect the two activities in a sequential control flow.
Okay. A sequential. Like the NGO cloud in.
No,
An
that the
example.
activities, the normal arrows represent the control flow.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So you connect the activity download ngrok from Equinox servers with the activity install ngrok with a normal arrow. And since it's sequential, it's from the top to the bottom.
It's okay if in this way.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that way. Mhm.
So
And the arrow that connects download ngrok to collab is dotted.
okay. What does dotted represents? If you can repeat that for me,
Dotted
please.
means that you're calling to an external entity. The
Okay. Yeah.
activity is performed by an external entity, and you do a call, an external call. In fact, the rectangles represent the control flow of our Python notebook.
Okay.
So
Didn't
we
know
are
that.
representing the control flow that we implemented in the Python notebook. Do you see that? We all see that.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. So then we perform an, if I remember well, we perform an authentication from our collaborate notebook
But
to
that's
the
later on.
nginx
That's later
server.
on. We we might maybe connect. What do we do with these two blocks? The one that Melina draw and the one that you draw. We have to connect them in some way, and I'm going to show you how. You are
Okay.
going to draw a circle on top of
Okay.
both.
A circle
Uh-huh. Circle on top.
at the top.
A little
Okay,
one,
I
very
find
little.
little one.
Mhm.
Yes.
Little bit. Mhm.
Ah. More little.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then you are going to connect with a normal arrow because it's the control flow to
Mhm.
create account,
Okay. Let me take this one. It accounts.
but in the opposite side.
Opposite side from here.
The other way the arrow. No, the other way the arrow.
Ah. Ah. Okay. Sorry.
The head of the arrow towards create
Okay.
account. And then you connect the little circle to download ngrok.
Okay. Ready.
And what we're saying is that our workflow is starting. Every workflow has just one starting point, and this is the circle. And we are doing two packages of activities in parallel, okay, two processes in parallel. One
Mhm.
drawn by Melina, which is create account, obtain the token, and at the same time validate the account, okay, by interacting with ngrok. That was a package of activities that we performed in our Python notebook. And the other is we download the code and then we install ngrok. And these two things were done, in fact, in parallel, or can be done independently, in fact. That's what it says,
Mhm. And should
right?
I put a name on the circle or no?
No, the circle is always like that. And then
Blank?
when we will finish, we are not finished, we haven't finished with the process. We have like, it's in like automatons, the circle with the little dot in the center. This
Ah.
means
Yeah.
we finish the process. Mm. Are you acquainted with activities diagram, UML diagram?
Mm, not really.
No? Haven't have in software engineering a UML?
Yes. Yes. We
Or
took
what?
that.
And what were the diagrams that you learned how to use?
Class diagrams, if I remember well.
Only class diagrams? No.
Uh, I remember
Packages?
that that ones, but
And who helps him?
no,
Nobody
my
help you.
my
They leave you alone. You see sequence
yeah.
diagrams, okay? Uh-huh.
Ah, yes, that's right.
What
Sequence
else?
diagrams.
You know, the sequence diagrams. We could, for example, if you feel more comfortable with UML, you could draw a sequence diagram to show this. If you feel more comfortable with that. The user diagram, you remember?
Mm-hmm.
The one with the little uh, guy or girl, and then blah, blah, blah. And then you have the packages.
Ah, yes, I remember that one.
Yeah, you remember? Yeah. Okay, so this is a sort of informal activities diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's next?
The authentication process.
Yes, okay. So for
Okay.
example, to make it easier, you could group the story of download and install in one
One.
box, and then
Okay.
we continue, in fact, with the authentication process. No, no, not like that. Use
Ah,
a
inside
bigger rectangle
another
and
box.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
You do not compact, you explode.
I cannot put. I cannot write more figures.
You can,
It says
well,
that
no,
you are
no,
trying
no
to access the
worries.
premium feature.
And do you know what we're doing this? Because I want to make sure that you understand but the very details of what we're doing. I don't want you to be monkeys. Well, we
No,
are all
it's
monkeys,
a
but
good practice.
we are all monkeys, but we are supposed to be of another level.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're not just
Uh,
monkeys like that and words, we are digging into the matter. Okay, so what do we do for authentication?
well, I cannot put more shapes or text or something more because it
You
said
cannot
that
put, why?
we reached to the limit of usage
Ah,
because we
to the
don't have a,
limit. Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
maybe
well,
we need to
describe to
change.
me. Just enumerate the activities that okay, we installed it, we're happy, and then what happens? Which are the steps?
Well, we need to perform an authentication token, the one that we generated previously. Uh,
So
with that
we have to.
we connect from. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
Ah, with that token we connect or we authenticate to the ngrok servers.
Okay, so connect to the servers and authenticate. These are the two activities, no?
Yes.
Okay, so we would have
Yes.
to draw two rectangles, okay? Connect to ngrok. Then provide the token, and that would be authenticating. And then, yeah, that would be it. And this
Then
should be, uh-huh.
ah well I was saying that after that we also need to install the Flask app.
But that's another thing, okay? Yeah,
Ah,
okay. The idea is that you separate, okay? So you authenticate
okay.
Black,
Yes.
and then will come Flask in order to connect that ngrok to the rest of the application.
So that would be in another diagram, no?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, so I think that
Exactly.
for this case in the
For the
ngrok
that,
we
this
end with
is
the
right.
authentication.
Yes, yes. And then we go to another step, which is how do we use this? You see, it's one thing we prepare the environment, and the other thing, okay, we have the environment prepared, and how do we use all those things now for another part of the control flow?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. More questions, reactions, comments.
Well,
Are we
I
clear
just
with the difference between process and architecture? Yes. So,
yes, it's clear. Uh, Now I just have a question about the ngrok software. Uh, do
yes.
do do you know how does it works in the I don't know in the background? So I think that
In the
it
background, what?
creates
Uh-huh.
a tunnel, no? And that kind
Yes.
of architecture, I'm not sure if that one is a reverse proxy or is something different.
You have different solutions.
Ah,
If you go to the specification of ngrok, in fact, it can
mhm,
provide you with different types of solutions. The one that we are using, in fact, it creates for every, in order to exhibit the port, that of the local application. What it creates is dynamically it creates aliases of the address, which is not really a reverse proxy. Okay.
Okay.
You see, but it can create reverse proxies and other different solutions depending on what you want to do.
I understand now.
You see, and that's and that's the very principle, of externalizing everything. You see, you have different aspects of that you have to deal with for a web application. One thing is the secure connection towards your application, and then depending on the network you are using, on the services that your network already provides, you can tune the type of solution that you can get out of ngrok. And you externalize all the secure connection to your application to that.
Okay.
That's something, that's a nice exercise to be done. For example, I was just invited to do the course, but a nice thing that could be done, for example, is getting acquainted with the professor of mobile environments, for example, and see whether in a mobile environment, what would be the best solution to ask for example, for ngrok. If you are externalizing, if your backend is externalized to another server, or if part of the solution of your application lies in the device. And depending on that, you could have the right ngrok or whatever solution in order to deal with that. So a nice exercise to be done, and since we are, you see, thinking about a follow-up, maybe we could do that once we have completed the diagrams. I will try to provide you with the possibilities of solutions and try to figure out which are the decision-making criteria that you should consider in order to choose one of them, supposing that you have the right credit card to buy anything.
That would be a nice exercise.
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you for asking that. We will do that. I think that next session, because we're reaching now the end of the first one. But yes, we will do that so that you have all the little elements to consider for deploying, in fact, a solution, which is the step forward once we have implemented. Right, we will do that.
Okay. And I have another question about the diagram that we are implementing.
Yes,
So you said that this type of diagrams is like a general one. It doesn't have a name.
it doesn't.
Well, I don't know.
I didn't get the last
It's
part of the question.
yeah. If this type of diagram is something that is standardized, or is just like a
Well, the one that we're
test
doing is
diagram.
not standardized. The one that we're
Okay.
doing
Okay.
is not standardized because I didn't know whether you were acquainted. There are other standards there's PPM for workflows, and there are other standards for this. And since I didn't know whether you were acquainted with UML or another standard, I decided to use an empirical one. But there are, well, the classic one is UML. Everyone knows UML. And so you can use either the sequence diagram or either the activities diagram, and then to show the process.
Okay. Okay.
But the one that we're doing, it's just it's just I'm making sure that you differentiate the fact of the activities and the fact that the activity is done by an external agent, and that we represent a control flow. And normally our control flows, since we are working in an imperative manner and a sequential programming model, our workflows are always sequential. We will see when we will address parallel computing that the workflows can really split. But no, this one is not at all a standard one. What I will do is in Blackboard announcements or whatever, I will put you the links to the standards that you can use in order to represent your processes. I think it's important
Okay.
because then you will
That would be
have to
nice to.
go to the market
Yes.
and do
Yes.
things.
And I imagine that different companies have their own.
Yes, different companies use their own variations. Yes, even with UML, well, you have the general UML specification, but according to the company, of course, they have their own. Some of the solutions also, there are solutions where you specify the workflow and then it runs. For example, in data processing, there's a solution from Apache called Airflow. And in Airflow, you define your workflows, and then they run. And so they have their own specifications, yes.
Yeah, that's good to know.
But anyway, I will give you the links. We do not have time to go through all the details about these specifications, but so that you have them in mind, and when you get hired, at least that you have heard about them, even if you haven't intensively used them intensively.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions?
For me, no.
Not for you. I just have a question. I see that I saw in your program, I saw this program that last semester you had industrial practice. Did you go to industry to do this task, this activity?
Yes.
Where? Where did you go?
What did you ask? Sorry.
Ah, Tabasek. Okay. Other people that have that went to industry to practice. Okay. Where? Francisco and Nicole. Okay. And this was one semester, so it's really 6 months.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a course in our curriculum. So we should do
Exactly.
mandatory. We have 2 semesters that we need to work at it.
Two
So
semesters.
yes,
But you change the place where you go to internship, or
you decide.
you
Yeah, if you want to, you can stay at the same company, but if you wish, you can change.
okay. So most of you want to industry for your internships. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Okay. So it's just to calibrate ideas that I have for sharing with you information. So okay. Oh, we are going to stop here. I see you on Friday. And so, as promised, by the end of the day today, you will have deadline of to hand in this future exercise specifications and the points that each activity is due. Okay, so have diagrams where Mauricio is suggesting where there is limit. Okay, so see you on Friday in Google Drive. I mean, you know, sometimes I really use like or PowerPoint or whatever, and I do my diagram. And then you don't have any limit. But if you feel comfortable, it's true that you can have this. Very good. So I wish you a nice day, and stay tuned on the Blackboard for the information of these grades and exercises and etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Have a nice day.
Bye bye. Nice day.